Cathy stood at the edge of the crowded party, the bass thumping in her chest as colorful lights danced around the dim room. She clutched her drink tighter, scanning the faces of friends and strangers, wondering if she should really be here. Just then the door swung open with a loud creak, and in walked Jake, tall and confident, a smirk playing on his lips. As he stepped into the room, the chatter dimmed for a moment. Cathy felt her heart race. Jake had a way of turning heads with a magnetic energy that surrounded him. Everyone noticed. He entered like he owned the place, and for a split second it felt like he truly did. A voice rang out from the corner, snapping Cathy from her thoughts. It was Sarah, her friend, who didn't exactly see Jake eye-to-eye. The tension was palpable. Sarah's tone was sharp. Jake chuckled, an easy laugh that carried. He paused for a moment, letting the silence hang. "I own this floor," he replied coolly, his eyes gleaming with mischief. It felt both arrogant and somehow charming. The crowd shifted, whispers and glances exchanged. Cathy felt a mix of anger and amusement. Sarah's eyes widened, caught in disbelief. Jake's confidence seemed to fill the gaps in the room, thickening the air. Everyone was suddenly drawn into this awkward standoff. As the music thumped on, Cathy could feel the tide turning. People were siding with Jake, or perhaps they were just captivated by his audacity. She studied him, trying to decipher what he was feeling beneath that carefree exterior. How could he act like this? Who did he think he was? But Jake wasn't just any guy. He had lived in this neighborhood for years, built connections, earned trust, or maybe it was just the way he carried himself. Cathy watched as he casually approached Sarah and asked for her drink, flashing a grin. It felt like a small victory when she hesitated, but ultimately gave it to him. Cathy couldn't take it. She moved toward them, frustration boiling beneath her surface. Her voice cut through the air, firm and steady. Jake turned, surprise flickering in his eyes. He shot back playfully, but Cathy wasn't in the mood for games. She could see the way other party-goers watched, intrigued, their eyes dancing between the three of them. "Let's not pretend you can just barge in anywhere," Sarah chimed in, her tone still sharp. With each word, the atmosphere crackled, the chemistry shifting. The party was losing itself in this unexpected confrontation. Cathy could feel more eyes turning toward them, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Jake raised a brow, a smile still tugging at the corners of his lips. "What makes someone special, Sarah? Is it privilege, money?" His confidence was jarring, a wave crashing over her, leaving her both enraged and impressed. Cathy could see Sarah struggling to find her response, a flash of uncertainty crossing her face. No one liked to admit it, but Jake had a point. This was a social game, a dance of power, and he was seemingly leading. A few people began to clap lightly, their laughter echoing in the now smaller bubble of tension they had created. Cathy's heart pounded harder. She knew she had to say something for Sarah, for herself. "You think you can just waltz in here and pretend like everything's yours?" For a second, the room grew quiet again, as if they were all holding their breath. With everyone watching, the stakes felt higher. Jake looked at Cathy, studying her. He asked, sincerity creeping into his voice for the first time. She could feel the heat in her cheeks as she blurted out, "Because it's not." Silence filled the room, and Cathy wondered if she'd gone too far. She could hear her heart beating, a frenetic rhythm that matched the pulse of the angry crowd. People murmured to each other, questioning, analyzing. Truth hung heavy in the air, but the moment felt like a tightrope, tipping dangerously. Jake shook his head, and for a heartbeat, his bravado faltered. "You think you know me?" He motioned around, his arms wide. "Everyone here has their own stories." Cathy felt the sadness crack through the pride in his voice. For an instant, she saw a glimpse of vulnerability. It was fleeting, but she couldn't unsee it. Maybe Jake's swagger was a mask, a shield against a world that hadn't always treated him well. Yet others were quick to respond, filling in the silence. Someone called. Another voice piped in, nurturing the judgment that hung over Jake. The room began to shake with voices rising, opinions clashing like clattering dishware. It was chaotic yet captivating. Cathy remained focused on Jake, who now stood at the center of the storm. They were locked into a battle of wits, both exposing their truths and defenses. "You're right, maybe I don't know you well," Cathy began again, her voice quieter but no less determined. There was a strength in her words, an age-old truth that resonated deep within. Jake surveyed her, the hustle of the party behind him now faded into a background hum. "Fair point," he acknowledged. His tone softened, dropping the bravado. "But owning this floor, it's about the moments, the connections, isn't it?" With that, the crowd began to settle, listening intently. Cathy felt the weight of her own isolation in that space. She was alone, yet somehow linked with each person in the room. "Every connection means something, Jake," she replied, voice steady. "You can't just sweep in and claim dominance." He nodded slowly, and in that moment, something shifted. The group breathed as one, tension ebbing slightly, smoothing its edges. Cathy couldn't believe how quickly the narrative had turned. What started as a showdown now felt like a complex dance, the rhythm of emotions pulling them together in unexpected ways. "You're right," Jake said finally, his words almost a whisper but loud enough for all to hear. "Maybe I've forgotten how to share the space." Cathy felt a flicker of hope. "We all feel that way sometimes." Jake smiled then, the kind that reached his eyes. The honesty disarmed Cathy. She realized he was just as human as anyone else, battling his own insecurities. Everyone around them seemed to relax, laughter bubbling back up, weaving through the air like strands of a colorful tapestry. They were gradually shifting from judgment to understanding, from rivalry to connection. As the atmosphere lifted, Jake raised his drink and looked around the room, genuinely smiling now. "Guess I owe it to all of you for reminding me." He held out his cup and slowly the room echoed with agreement. Laughter resumed, the earlier tension dissolving into camaraderie. Cathy felt relief wash over her, realizing they had come out of an impasse with a stronger bond. Moments like this were rare, like fleeting butterflies that landed for just a second, mesmerizing yet fragile. She turned back to Sarah and grinned. Sarah chuckled, shaking her head. Across the room, Jake caught Cathy's eye again and nodded. A silent agreement passed between them, a truce, maybe even a tentative friendship born from a clash of egos. The party felt different now, less charged, more alive. Suddenly, it didn't just feel like a place where people stood alone in their circles, but a vibrant network of shared stories and laughter, their passions interwoven in a joyful tapestry. Cathy raised her own drink to the crowd, another heartbeat of connection thrumming through her. In that moment, she understood that life is more than ownership, more than power. It was about bridging divides, hearing each other out, and discovering who you are among everyone else too. And so, as the bass dropped back into a familiar rhythm, Cathy found herself surrounded by friends, both old and new. Jake blended into the group, engaging with the crowd, free of the tension they had created together just moments before. In that simple party, with the lights dimming and laughter echoing, they all found their place together on that same inviting floor. The moment the door swung open, a hush fell over the crowded room, slicing through the chatter and music like a knife. All eyes turned toward the latecomer, a tall figure with a charm that radiated confidence. He stepped inside, scanned the revelers like a conqueror surveying his kingdom. Then a single voice broke the silence. Sarah demanded, her brow furrowing as she made her way through the throng. The animosity in her tone was unmistakable, like a warning bell ringing. Jake shrugged, the hint of a smirk on his lips. "I own this floor," he replied coolly, his voice smooth as silk. The words hung in the air, thick with tension. A collective gasp swept through the crowd, and Cathy felt the room shift as if it were waiting for a storm to break. He was new to the neighborhood, a mystery that wrapped around him like an expensive cologne. Everyone had heard whispers about him, who he was, where he came from. Yet no one could deny the way he held the room in the palm of his hand. With a cocktail in one hand and an irreverent smirk on his face, he looked unfazed by the sudden standoff. Cathy felt an involuntary shiver run down her spine. What was it about him that excited her yet made her uneasy? Sarah shot back, her voice strong, unwavering. Cathy admired her for this. Sarah always stood her ground. "Why not?" Jake shot back, the smile still glimmering on his face. He stepped further into the room, eyes glinting. "Claiming our space, our territory." Cathy watched, her heart pounding. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a showdown between two different worlds, one rooted in sophistication and privilege, the other in hard-won pride. The crowd tensed like a rubber band pulled to its limit, ready to snap. "Maybe you should understand what respect looks like," Sarah continued, anger seeping into her tone. They both locked eyes, fierce, unyielding. Jake tilted his head, feigning curiosity. Respect. Cathy could see Sarah's cheeks flush crimson. How did he have this power to cut so deep? The crowd leaned closer, the energy shifting as lines were drawn. It was like witnessing a live drama unfold, and Cathy felt trapped between wanting to intervene and being drawn into the thrill of it all. Cathy shouted, stepping forward, her pulse racing. "We're all here to enjoy the night." Jake turned to her, his expression shifting from amusement to intrigue. Ah, the wise peacemaker. His tone dripped with condescension that made her stomach churn. "Maybe not, but the last thing this place needs is a dogfight over who's big man on campus." She shot back, feeling the adrenaline course through her veins. The atmosphere charged, the intensity palpable. Jake stepped closer, the playful smirk now replaced with something more serious, more vulnerable. "And you think you can stand here and expect everyone to play nice?" His gaze locked with hers, and for a brief moment the room faded away. It was just the two of them in this towering clash of ideals, her grounded practicality against his wild ambition. What did it mean to stake a claim on a place, a feeling, a person? "Maybe you're right," Cathy said, matching his intensity. "But there's a difference between claiming a space and demanding it." Jake's eyes softened. "That's a fair point." In the pin-drop silence that followed, every heart in the room beat a little faster. Cathy could see glimpses of something deeper in his eyes, and insecurities beneath the bravado. She could relate to that, the need to be accepted, to belong. How easily had she felt invisible sometimes, even among friends. She asked, her voice steadying. "Why this bravado?" He hesitated, glancing at the floor before meeting her gaze again. "Maybe I'm just tired of being overlooked. It's easy to build walls." For a heartbeat, the tension melted like ice in the sun. What had begun as a standoff transformed into an unspoken understanding. But the crowd, restless and unwilling to let the moment go without a real resolution, murmured softly. "Look, the truth is," Cathy said, her voice strong, "we're all fighting our own battles, but we don't have to do it alone." Jake nodded slowly, acknowledging her point. The crowd remained breathless, waiting for his next move as if he were the centerpiece of a grand performance. "All right," he said finally, "let's share it, but only if everyone knows they can bring their true selves forward." Cheers erupted from the onlookers, their excitement filling the room. The shift felt monumental, the confrontation transforming into a new alliance, a moment of kinship. "Deal," Sarah piped up, no longer defensive. She extended her hand toward Jake, who hesitated but eventually took it, a spark igniting the atmosphere. The crowd erupted in applause, excitement washing over them like a refreshing wave. They were all in it together now, bound by a strange mixture of rivalry and newfound respect. As the night progressed, Jake mingled, no longer the lone wolf but part of the pack. He smiled more easily, engaged openly in conversations, and even took part in games, his earlier sharpness fading into something gentler and more approachable. Cathy watched, feeling a swell of pride. This was the change she had hoped for, genuine connection blossoming where there had once been conflict. People settled into the rhythm of networking, laughing, sharing stories as angles tangled and merged into one. Later, while mingling with others, Cathy noticed Jake approach her with a grin. "You know," he said, "you made me rethink how I approach social situations." "That's just good talking sense," she shrugged, unable to hide the smile creeping onto her face. "Everyone needs a reminder now and then." Jake chuckled, the laughter undulating around them. "You're right, and I'm not just here to impress. I genuinely want to connect." Through the buzzing atmosphere, Cathy felt hopeful about what lay ahead. She had assumed tonight would be just another night, a meaningless gathering. Instead, it was loaded with surprises, profound insights, and unexpected friendships. By the end of the evening, Jake had morphed into something more than just the new guy. He had become part of the collective energy, a daring whirlpool of connections and friendships in the making. As Cathy looked around, faces lit up under the soft glow of fairy lights, laughter spilling freely, she couldn't help but feel grateful. They all were writing their own stories together, day by day, moment by moment. With the bass pulsing in rhythm to the energy in the room, Cathy noticed Sarah and Jake in animated conversation, trading laughs and stories. This wouldn't have been possible without the fire of conflict that had brought them together. "Maybe there's a reason we need people like him," Cathy reflected, feeling fulfilled. Jake caught her eye again across the room, his smile warm and inviting. They both knew that this night had forged something different, not just friendships, but a community. Each person shining just as brightly as the last, amplifying the collective experience. As the night wore on and the music wrapped around them in a comforting embrace, Cathy felt a sense of belonging take root deep inside her. The floor belonged to all of them now, a democratic space filled with laughter, vulnerability, and unabashed joy. And in this sanctuary where Jake had once declared himself the king, they'd all learned the true value of sharing the space together. The bright, pulsing lights flashed like wild fireflies, casting sharp shadows on the faces in the crowded room. Laughter and music intertwined in a chaotic melody, creating a buzz that electrified the air. But then, just as the beat dropped in a particularly intense moment, the front door swung open. Heads turned and the atmosphere shifted, and walked a figure who exuded confidence, his presence radiating like a beacon. Tall and charismatic, he scanned the room with a smirk that seemed to say he knew he was the center of attention. It was clear that he felt right at home. Whispering swept through the crowd, curious glances exchanged. Who was this man? Sarah's voice rang out, slicing through the cacophony like a honed dagger. Everyone fell silent, turning to her, the tension rising like steam in the air. She stood tall, arms crossed, defiance dancing in her eyes. Jake, the newcomer, glanced at her with an amused grin. "I own this floor," he declared coolly, his tone unwavering, oozing self-assurance. Gasps echoed around the room, the impact of his words sending a ripple through the crowd. Cathy, a few feet away, stood rooted to the spot, her heart racing. Who did he think he was? The room seemed to hold its breath, caught in that moment between disbelief and anticipation. Sarah narrowed her eyes. "You own this floor," Jake shrugged, feigning nonchalance, but Cathy could see the sparkle of amusement in his eye. "Since I stepped in." He tilted his head slightly, an expression of mock innocence painting his features. The murmurs intensified like wind sweeping through autumn leaves. Cathy watched the drama unfold, caught between wanting to shout at him and being oddly drawn in by his audacity. Sarah pushed forward, her frustration bubbling over. "You think you can just walk in here and lay claim to everything?" Jake stepped closer to Sarah, the air thickening as tension wrapped around them. "You're right, it's not how it works for most people, but for me." The room reacted, eyes darting back and forth, a mix of intrigue and disbelief. Cathy could sense a shift. The crowd was hungry for entertainment, waiting to see how the confrontation would unfold. It felt like being in a movie where the stakes were suddenly raised to a thrilling level. Sarah shot back, fire in her voice. "This is our space." Jake raised an eyebrow, a sly grin still framing his lips. "Respect is earned, isn't it? You don't just sit back and hope it falls in your lap." Something dark and thrilling flickered in his words, setting Cathy's heart pounding. It wasn't just bravado, there was a hint of genuine belief behind that facade. Yet the danger in his approach prickled her senses. Cathy interjected, stepping beside Sarah. He turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes as if he expected her to remain silent while Sarah did the fighting. He quipped, a trace of defensiveness creeping in. Strength isn't about taking control by brute force, she said, her voice rising to meet his challenge. It's about building something together. Jake's gaze held hers for a moment, an unspoken conversation flowing between them. There was something raw and stirring in those few seconds, a crack in his confident veneer revealing the uncertainty beneath. Interesting perspective, he said finally, tone shifting from cocky to contemplative. Maybe you're right, but sometimes it feels like I have to shout in order to be heard. Sarah's expression softened, albeit just a touch. We all have our stories. But we're here because we chose to be. Cathy felt the weight of those words settle into the atmosphere, offering a counterbalance to Jake's bravado. The crowd had fallen into a hush again, waiting for him to respond, the stakes escalating with each heartbeat. You're all right, Jake admitted, his voice noticeably lower. Silence. For a brief moment, the crowd was suspended in time. Jake's admission was unexpected, a depth revealed that stood in stark contrast to the bravado he had exhibited moments before. Cathy could sense the shift, everyone leaning in, absorbing his vulnerability. I'm not here to take your space, but maybe I just need to learn how to share it, he continued. There was a spark of understanding in the crowd. Cathy let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, sensing the tide turning. That's a good start, she replied, her voice softer now. We all feel alone at times. Jake nodded, his expression shifting again, becoming more sincere, more open. Maybe I'll take that mask off then. Sarah stepped closer, the defiant edge in her voice softening. We can always use more genuine connections. The atmosphere charged with hope, warmth replacing the earlier tension. The crowd seemed to lean in, seeing the transformation unfold. Each word exchanged kindled a connection, a moment in shared vulnerability that spiraled into something uplifting. Okay, Jake finally said, breaking the palpable silence. Let's try this again. No bravado, no masks, just me. Applause erupted from the crowd, cheers mingling with laughter. The collective breath they'd been holding rushed out in a wave of relieved energy. The playful animosity had melted into camaraderie, and suddenly the party vibe returned, buoyed by genuine energy. Cathy felt a smile break across her face, her heart swelling with newfound sense. She caught Jake's eye again, and this time the connection felt different, no longer a clash, but an alliance beginning to form. After that moment, the evening transformed. Jake laughed with the group, engaged in conversations that blossomed instead of clashed. He stepped outside his comfort zone, connecting with people who had previously felt manipulated by his earlier act. Cathy watched as he partnered with Sarah in a party game, laughter intertwined with their shared energy. She could see the weight lift off both their shoulders, a shared crisis turning into silly fun. What was born from tension morphed into the dance of true friendship. As the night stretched ahead, Jake opened up more, sharing snippets of his past, a lonely childhood that forced him to create an exterior that protected him, but also isolated him. I've always been the outsider, he confessed, frustration splintering through his words. The vulnerability of his admission was palpable. Cathy felt the universality of his struggle, recognizing pieces of her own battle within his confession. We've all been outsiders at times, she replied, empathy shining in her gaze. The air hummed gently, laughter melding with understanding. Connections deepened, walls came down, and everyone began to share their stories, lifting one another in that newfound bond. By the time the evening began to wind down, it felt nothing short of magical in a room buzzing with happiness. People who had once appeared as strangers now felt like friends, knitting together a tapestry of shared moments. As Jake wrapped up conversations and mingled, Cathy caught his eye again. This time she didn't see the young confident man strutting in to claim dominion. Instead, she saw a person embracing vulnerability. The floor is definitely ours, he said, beaming. Cathy smiled back, feeling grateful for the journey they'd taken together. This wasn't just about claiming a space, it was about creating a community. Together, outside, as the air turned crisp and fresh, the laughter from the party spilled into the cool night. The city seemed to buzz with a newfound energy, hope mingling beneath the vibrant stars. In that moment, she understood that sometimes true strength lies in lifting others up, in breaking down barriers, and in letting go of what holds us back. The world suddenly felt wide open, filled with possibilities and genuine connections. That night marked a turning point, a beautiful reminder that together they could all own the floor, turning once divided paths into a united story. The door slammed open, sending a gust of air through the room, and every head turned. The bass from the music seemed to dip in acknowledgement. Eyes widened, faces shifted, huddled groups broke apart, and silence followed. Just inside the threshold stood a young man, shoulders broad, exuding an energy that felt almost electric. His gaze danced over the crowd, sharp and confident, landing on the pulsing heart of the party. Sarah exclaimed from across the room, her voice slicing through the tension like a hot knife. Dressed in a sleek black dress, she looked every bit the part of the reigning queen of the night, but on her face was disbelief, even a touch of anger. Jake, the intruder, smirked as he sauntered further into the room. I own this floor, he replied, a casual confidence oozing from him. The words hung in the silence, vibrating with bravado. Gasps punctuated the air as the crowd shifted like a restless sea. Cathy stood at the bar, drink in hand, watching the scene unfold with a mix of curiosity and dread. Who did this guy think he was? The party was Sarah's. It had always been Sarah's. Jake was too new, too bold, striding in like he claimed some hidden throne, and the crowd's energy was palpable. Own it. You've been here for 5 minutes, Sarah snapped back, grounding her feet as if to make it clear that this was her territory. Jake shrugged, unfazed, his eyes glinting with mischief. A chilling laughter escaped from his lips, echoing against the walls. The tension felt thick, almost suffocating. Cathy felt her heart race as the room simmered with anticipation, everyone waiting for the next exchange. I don't think you understand how this works, Sarah said, stepping forward, her voice unwavering. The music had become a distant thrum, the jubilant beat replaced by the electric charge crackling between the three of them. Jake stayed calm, his posture relaxed, a confident smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Actually, I think I do understand. Cathy felt a rush of sympathy for Sarah. He's just trying to provoke you, she whispered under her breath, but in truth, she wondered what drove Jake's audacity. What made him feel entitled to assert himself so forcefully? Yet in the midst of it, there was something captivating about Jake. He radiated an allure she couldn't quite dismiss. The way he held himself, his eyes that sparkled like something dangerously intoxicating. It drew people in, made them lean closer, even if they were meant to resist. Let's be real, Jake continued, his tone shifting slightly, a challenge lacing his words. You've built a bubble around this floor, assuming everyone conforms to your rules, but what if we disrupted that? Sarah clenched her jaw, fire igniting in her eyes. This is about respect. You can't just barge in like you own the place. Exactly, Cathy jumped in, feeling emboldened. We fought too hard for this space to have someone walk in and act like they're better than everyone else. Jake studied them both, narrowing his gaze in a way that sent a flutter across Cathy's stomach. And it's magnificently boring, he shot back. A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd, curiosity blossoming. Cathy felt the heat in the air, the palpable tension morphing into something resembling intrigue. Could he be right? Authenticity doesn't come from arrogance, Sarah said, crossing her arms, casting a challenging look at him. If we wanted a show, we'd go to the theater. Here we want connection. Jake paused, taking a breath as he absorbed her words. You talk about connection, but how real is it? How much do you open yourselves up to others? Cathy felt a pang of truth in his question. It hit deeper than she wanted to admit. How many masks had she put on for others? How many times had she shied away from letting people in? The dynamics of a party often twisted into a performance, and to some extent they all played their roles, whether king or queen or jester. Sarah challenged, her voice tinged with uncertainty. For a moment silence reigned again. Everyone looked from one face to the other like spectators awaiting the climax of a tense drama. Jake's glance flickered toward Cathy before he nodded slowly, the tension diffusing slightly. All right, let's see how real this floor can be, he said, a newfound sincerity creeping into his tone. No barriers, no pretense, just. The crowd seemed to exhale collectively, the air seeming less oppressive. Split-second emotions shifted from hostility to curiosity, eyes gleaming as the stakes rose. Would he really unravel this tension? Could each of them peel back layers? Let's play a game, Jake suggested. Cathy couldn't deny her intrigue. She thought about the game. It was meant to reveal something hidden, to bridge the gap between strangers. It held both promise and danger. Fine, Sarah said reluctantly, still eyeing him warily. Jake laughed, a real laugh that invited others to join. Deal. He took a deep breath, seemingly shuffling through thoughts. I once met a celebrity. I've gone skydiving. The crowd erupted in a mixture of surprise and laughter, the lightness breaking the tension once and for all. Cathy felt a rush of relief, and the air transformed, lightening into curious energy. Someone yelled, laughter continuing to build. Jake wiggled his eyebrows, a playful grin spreading across his face. Actually, it's true. Sarah chimed in, cracking a smile. False. The laughter swelled, people joining in, drawn by the energy of him, a captivating whirlwind, presenting a more authentic self than she expected. Slowly, it seemed like the barriers between them began to dissolve. One by one, people shared their truths and lies, stories laced with vulnerability. Cathy joined in, bringing her own, while the crowd laughed, gasped, and unraveled together. The game felt liberating, each turn another notch of authenticity gaining ground. As the night wore on, the pressure of earlier conflicts faded into happiness. Jake swirled through the crowd, pulling people in, genuinely relating to each one, beaming charisma that transformed him from an outsider into a friend. Jake laughed, I'm full of surprises. You're fitting in just fine, Cathy chimed in, her heart lightening. Jake had transformed from a perceived threat to an unexpected ally in reshaping how they all experienced their shared space. The floor beneath their feet, the music blaring around them, the laughter spilling forth. With every connection made, every story shared, they all began to weave together a narrative that felt real. Cathy reflected on the journey, feeling the weight of her own barriers cracking just a little. By the end of the evening, the dancers moved seamlessly from one song to another, bodies swaying rhythmically, unified by connections unexpectedly formed. They had turned a night that seemed poised for conflict into an unforgettable celebration of authenticity, a tapestry brightened by stories shared. As the night drew to a close and the laughter echoed into the dimming lights, Cathy and Sarah stood by the bar, glancing over to Jake, who animatedly engaged with a group, building connections with an infectious enthusiasm. He really did shake things up, Cathy noted, pleased yet surprised. Maybe we all needed a reminder that owning a floor means sharing it. Sarah nodded, the tension long gone. Yeah, it turns out he adds to the excitement rather than stealing it. Cathy felt satisfied as a warm breeze rolled in, brushing through her hair and catching glimpses of stars through the windows. The energy in the room was unlike anything she had ever experienced, evolving into something raw and electric that connected them all. In that moment, she recognized the beauty of belonging, of taking off the masks and stepping into the shared heartbeat of humanity. This wasn't just a party, it was an exploration of self, of openness, and of finding the courage to connect. Every last person in that room owned a part of that floor, and together they had created a bond that shone brighter than any light overhead. Each story, each interaction resonated like gentle echoes beneath the music. And as she stood with Sarah, watching the joyous chaos unfold, Cathy knew one thing for sure. Sometimes the best way to claim a space is to embrace the moment and let everything else fall away. They had transformed a night of potential conflict into a night of profound connection, all through the simple act of sharing their lives. Jake caught her eye at that moment, his grin wide and illuminating as if he had discovered the secret everyone had overlooked. They all belonged here together. And that was the magic of truly owning the floor. The door swung open with a creak, and just like that, the music stuttered, a sharp pause electrifying the air. The party, which had been a swirl of laughter and bright colors, suddenly quieted like a scene cut sharply in a film. All eyes turned towards the newcomer, a tall figure, casually confident, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the room. He stepped inside, strutting in like he owned not just the room, but the entire building. Sarah's voice echoed through the crowd, crackling with disbelief and authority. She was known for claiming her territory with an iron fist, a self-appointed queen of the social scene. The newcomer smiled, sharp and knowing, as if he relished the attention. "I own this floor," Jake replied coolly, leaning back slightly, his body language a testament to unshakable confidence. Gasps resonated through the crowd like the faintest whisper of thunder before a storm. Cathy, her drink poised halfway to her lips, darted a glance at Sarah, whose expression morphed from surprise to righteous indignation. This wasn't just an intrusion, this was an outright challenge. Sarah demanded, her voice rising, "You've been here for 5 minutes." Jake shrugged, the ease of his movements contrasting sharply with Sarah's tension. "Maybe that's the point," he replied, a glimmer of amusement dancing in his eyes. The room quivered with the electricity of conflict, eyes glued to the unfolding. Cathy's heart raced, she could feel the pressure mounting, and at the same time there was something oddly magnetic about Jake. His confidence wasn't just a show, it felt like a force of nature. "Respect isn't something you take, it's something you earn," Sarah shot back, her arms crossed defensively. The room was on edge, caught in an unseen tug-of-war between self-assuredness and authority. Jake's smirk narrowed and he stepped closer to Sarah, the air around them thickening. "What if people don't take the time to notice what you're doing?" he asked, his voice dropping to a more contemplative tone. Cathy felt a flicker of sympathy for Jake. Maybe he was just a guy who had faced his own battles. The way he spoke hinted at deeper wounds, an unquenchable longing for acceptance masked by bravado. Yet even as she felt for him, a part of her was still wary. "Life isn't about demanding respect through noise and arrogance," Cathy interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Sarah. "It's about authenticity, about building connections." Jake paused, taken aback by the sudden shift in direction. He said, his tone now edged with sincerity, "People often look right through me." Cathy felt a pang of empathy ripple through her. They all wore masks sometimes, didn't they? In a world where everyone tried to stake their claim, perhaps he was just trying to be seen. "We all feel that way at times, Jake." The tension began to crack slightly, the drumbeat of the music picking back up just enough for conversation to filter back into the space. "Maybe I've just gotten used to being the outsider," Jake admitted, a vulnerability edging into his bravado. The crowd seemed to lean in closer, captivated by this unexpected turn. "Look," Sarah said, her tone softening, "we're not here to push anyone away. But you can't just walk in and assume you have the right to dictate the atmosphere." Jake regarded her for a moment, contemplating her words. "Okay," he said finally, "then why don't we make this a game? Let's show each other who we are." The crowd relayed nervous energy, the face-off transforming into an invitation cloaked in charm. Cathy would have preferred a more straightforward resolution to the tension, but there was something strangely compelling about his proposal of vulnerability masked as a game. Maybe this was the bridge they needed. "Fine," Sarah said, her expression a mix of challenge and reluctant intrigue. Jake laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to ease the atmosphere a little further. As he prepared to share, Cathy felt a rush of curiosity. What would he say to undo the bravado he had wrapped around himself? "Okay, here goes," Jake began, a twinkle in his eye. "I once played guitar with a famous rock band. I have a pet tarantula." This caught a few chuckles. A tarantula. "That's gotta be the lie," someone called out, laughter bubbling across the group. Jake shook his head, his expression unyielding. "Nope, that's real." The crowd erupted in surprised laughter, energy shifting dynamically from tense confrontation to playful banter. Suddenly the stage was set for something real, something collaborative instead of combative. Cathy felt the weight on her shoulders ease as she joined in, sharing her own truths and light new truths about her love of art and poetry, and a lie about hating dogs. They laughed, and slowly, the storm that had brewed just moments before dissipated into a warm breeze. Laughter swelled and boiled over as each person unveiled their own truths, illuminating parts of themselves that often remained hidden behind social barriers. As vulnerable stories unfolded, the initial animosity transformed into empathy and understanding. Jake, invigorated by the magnetic energy now blooming all around him, leaned closer to Sarah and Cathy. "You know, I came in so focused on being seen that I forgot what it meant to connect." Sarah smiled, her guard lowering further, while Cathy caught a glimpse of the boy behind the bravado. Exactly, by the time the game wrapped up, the tension had melted like snow under the sun. People moved freely around the room, guided not by the fear of judgment, but by the excitement of shared experience. Cathy felt the familial bond envelop them, a vibrant tapestry woven with laughter and heartfelt stories. Hours slipped by as Jake skillfully maneuvered through the crowd, laughing and interacting with each person, showing newfound respect and eagerness to form relationships. He wasn't the interloper assaulting their party, he was a fellow traveler searching for connection. At one point, Cathy caught a tear in the corner of Jake's eye, something raw and real. "I didn't expect tonight to turn out like this," he admitted, genuine amazement spilling from his heart. "I've spent so long wearing a mask, and it feels good to just drop it." Cathy felt her heart swell with recognition. We all need those moments where we can let our guards down. As the music swelled once more and silhouettes moved in rhythm, the energy was unmistakably lighter. Cathy felt more relaxed, embracing the enchanting chaos of friends finding family and strangers becoming companions. By the end of the evening, laughter reverberated around the space, the darkness outside stark in contrast to the warmth pooling inside. Jake had woven a thread through their lives, reshaping perceptions and transforming fear into something beautifully collaborative. Facing the group one last time, Jake raised his cup and, with sincerity echoing in the air, declared, "To owning this floor together." A collective cheer erupted, and Cathy couldn't help but smile as they all clinked their glasses, a sense of community and shared experience shining through like a beacon in the night. As she caught Jake's eye amidst the exuberance, she knew they had gone from potential adversaries to partners in creating something meaningful. The floor, marked by many stories and hidden truths, had turned into a shared narrative, a journey they had embarked on together, redefining what it meant to belong. Sometimes it took an unexpected confrontation to peel back the layers and reveal the beautiful mess of life. In that moment, she realized that everyone deserves a chance to own their space and interact in a way that honors the shared struggles, the light moments, and ultimately, the spirit of connection. Outside the door, the night felt vast, the stars shining like tiny promises of adventure. And as she stepped into the cool air, Cathy knew tonight was more than just a party. It was the embodiment of a lesson learned. As they walked out together, she recognized that owning a floor was never just about claiming space. It was about embracing dialogue, compassion, and genuine connection with others. The laughter was uproarious, mixed with the thumping beats reverberating through walls as low lights flickered like stars in the packed room. It was the kind of party where people let go, surrendered to the rhythm, and let the night carry them away. But suddenly, like a ghost stepping through a veil, a door swung open wide and silence fell like a blanket. Everyone turned, eyes drawn to the figure standing in the doorway. Jake leaned against the frame, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his dark jeans, a smirk tugging at his lips. He scanned the room, taking in the energy, the laughter, the connections being made. Then his gaze landed on Sarah, who stood frozen, cocktail in hand, disbelief painted across her face. She barked, her tone sharp, cutting through the stillness. It was a dare laced with protectiveness, and the tension in the air thickened like smoke. "I own this floor," Jake said, his voice smooth and confident, as if he were a king stepping into his kingdom. The words radiated an intensity that made the crowd stir with a mix of surprise and intrigue. Gasps punctuated the sudden silence, disbelief mingling with the intoxicating buzz of the party. Cathy stood a few feet away, drink hesitating at her lips. Who did he think he was, strolling in here and claiming dominion like this? Sarah challenged, stepping forward, a warrior ready for battle. Her assertiveness had always been the glue that held their social circle together. Jake shrugged, his body language unsettlingly relaxed. Maybe that's the point. The tension was electric, a frayed wire teetering on the brink of igniting. Cathy felt her heart race, the drama unfolding like a scene out of a movie. They had all fought so hard to build this community, and now someone was trying to bulldoze their careful construction. "Look, everyone here has earned their place," Sarah shot back, her voice firm. You walk in here and assume authority. Jake stepped forward, the energy around him shifting. Respect, that's interesting. What if you spent your life being overlooked? Cathy's heart sank slightly. There was an edge of vulnerability buried beneath his bravado, an unspoken truth hidden behind that confidence. She could see a challenge brewing. Beneath the surface of his bold declarations lay a desperation to be acknowledged. That's not how life works, Jake, Cathy interjected, stepping closer to Sarah, fueled by an impulse to defend her territory. You don't get respect by just demanding it. The room hung in a fragile silence, thousands of unspoken words latent in the air. Jake's eyes flicked between them, calculating, processing. Your noise doesn't matter if it's never followed up with sincerity, Cathy replied, her voice steady. She felt the intensity of the crowd's gaze, the palpable tension throbbing like a heartbeat. Pause, a slight crack in Jake's armor. He hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Sometimes it's hard to connect when you feel like you're drowning, he finally admitted, his voice quieter now. Cathy noticed a shift, not just in him, but in everyone around them. The intensity of the confrontation felt personal, a shared moment of revelation. Sarah's defenses softened slightly. Fine, Jake mumbled, visibly deflated. Join us in a game, Sarah replied, her tone shifting to something more playful yet still firm. Let's play two truths and a lie and see what you're really made of. Show us who you are beneath all of. She gestured vaguely and the crowd leaned in, intrigued. For a moment, uncertainty washed over Jake, but he broke into a genuine grin. The tension in the room melted ever so slightly, curiosity igniting amidst the crowd. It was a game anyone could play and a platform for revealing themselves without the danger of confrontation. Cathy joined in and soon others followed suit, sharing their truths and layouts sprinkled with laughter. Jake leaned forward, ready to go first. Okay, here we go. I once danced with a famous pop star. I have a pet iguana. The laughter rippled through the room. Someone exclaimed, shaking their head. Jake said with delight, the lie is dancing with a pop star. Everyone erupted in laughter, the air thickening with newfound ease, and Cathy felt the weight lift just a little more. Sharing their truths felt liberating, and she found herself warming to Jake's infectious energy. Maybe there was a part of him searching for connection too. As more people took their turns, maintaining the carefree atmosphere, Jake's earlier boastfulness transformed into a playful engagement. Cathy saw Sarah's skepticism slip away with each shared truth, and as they began a chat between turns, she noticed Jake's tone soften, revealing his genuine self. You know, I've spent a lot of time feeling invisible, he said during one of his turns when asked why he had moved to their city. I thought claiming space meant making a statement. That's spot on, Sarah replied, her tone surprisingly warm. Cathy felt the excitement swell like a tide in the room. They had shifted from combatants to comrades, gathering stories instead of woven lines of defense. With each round, they connected deeper, everyone leaning in, emotions out in the open. As the evening went on, Jake embraced his role fully, mingling with the crowd, sharing laughter, stepping outside the bounds he'd constructed for himself. And Cathy couldn't help but admire that transformation. Eventually, she found herself standing beside him, the air between them charged with the warmth of mutual understanding. I didn't expect this to turn into a lesson about connection, she mentioned lightly. He replied, glancing around the room, spotting laughing friends in pockets throughout. I didn't know I needed it until I felt that tug of acceptance. Cathy nodded, valuing his honesty. Yeah, he said thoughtfully, eyes drifting over everyone enjoying themselves. Life is about these moments, they just don't seem to make sense in the heat of the moment. Turns out no one needed you to shout. Jake grinned, his shoulders relaxing further than before, as if they had been harboring some tension he hadn't even noticed until now. Thanks for not holding back. The night continued to unfurl like a beautiful story, laughter ensnared within the notes of the music. The space shifted from tension to warmth, a vibrant tapestry woven from shared experiences and storytelling. As the evening waned and the glow of lights washed over them, Cathy looked around at her friends, no longer a bubble of defenses or preconceived notions. They had turned a potential confrontation into a bridge of newfound mutuality that resonated in the air. Jake yelled as the music softened, gathering everyone's attention through the crescendo of laughter. I just want to say this has been a wild ride. Thank you for reminding me what it means to really belong to something, not just occupy space. Cheers erupted, applause reverberating against the walls, making the air buzz with excitement. They felt connected, united through moments of vulnerability. As they clinked their cups together, Cathy felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude swell in her chest. This was it, the magic of community, the essence of shared experiences, breaking down barriers that had at first felt insurmountable. They hadn't just claimed the floor, they had transformed it into a space filled with joy, acceptance, and mutual respect. In that moment, Cathy knew they were no longer just individuals navigating through a crowded room. They had evolved into a collective, intertwined by stories of laughter and unguarded truths. The atmosphere had shifted irrevocably, and as Cathy stepped outside with Jake and Sarah later, the night air kissed her cheeks, cool and refreshing. Everything felt new and alive. Tonight was unexpected, Jake said, casting a glance at her. I appreciate you standing by me. I realized I didn't have to own the floor. Exactly, Cathy replied, the stars glimmering overhead like a constellation of possibilities laid out before them. We all own a piece of this. Throughout the night beneath the moonlit canopy and the sparkling stars, they hadn't just found something fleeting. They had forged authentic friendships that were destined to grow, enriched by this transformative experience. Cathy recognized that sometimes the loudest noise comes not from a demand for attention, but from stories shared, laughter unleashed, and the bravery to step forward without fear. Together, they had created something meaningful, turning a point of conflict into a celebration of togetherness. Once outsiders in their own way, they had turned into allies, grounded in their shared humanity. And as the music faded in the background and laughter danced in the night air, it became clear this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The door swung open with a jarring creak that silenced the laughter, and all eyes turned. The music, once a pulsing heartbeat, faded to a careful hum. In stepped a figure who commanded attention, tall, confident, with a smirk that seemed to say he was untouchable. Jake. Fresh to the party, fresh to the city, yet radiating an air of self-assuredness that felt almost daring. Sarah's voice echoed, sharp and incredulous, slicing through the tension. She stood at the center of the room, a self-appointed queen of the night, her cocktail perched precariously in one hand. Jake turned to face the crowd, a playful grin stretching across his face. I own this floor, he replied smoothly, basking in the moment as if pronouncing an undeniable truth. Gasps flitted through the onlookers, an electric charge in the air. Cathy, standing at the bar, felt her heart race. Who did he think he was, entering with such arrogance and claiming context he had yet to earn? The atmosphere crackled, charged with intrigue and indignation. Sarah challenged, her tone a blend of disbelief and authority. Crossed arms and tilted head, she meant business. Jake shrugged as if the question amused him. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, eyes darting between Sarah and Jake, anticipation hanging like smoke in the air. Cathy felt herself squirm under the weight of the unspoken drama unfolding before her. Did this newcomer really think he could just waltz in and claim authority? Listen, Sarah said, her voice unwavering. You don't just waltz in here and act like you own the place. Respect is earned. Jake repeated, and although he maintained that casual demeanor, there was an edge beneath his words. What if no one notices you? Cathy felt a pang of empathy for him. It was a truth buried beneath the bravado. How often had she felt invisible, screaming in silence, desperate for someone to see her? But this wasn't about her feelings, this was about the fight for their space. Noise doesn't equal strength, Cathy interjected, stepping next to Sarah. If you want to own this floor, you have to show us who you really are first. The room held its breath. Eyes were glued to Jake, a mix of challenge and intrigue in the air. The energy shifted. He looked momentarily taken aback. He asked, his tone softening yet still holding that confident edge. It was vulnerability wrapped in bravado, and Cathy could see it. Show us what's real, Sarah urged, her voice steady. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in Jake's eyes, but he gathered himself, a lingering smirk returning to his lips. Fine, let's play a game then. The crowd buzzed with surprise, their curiosity piqued. Cathy could see this was a chance for them to step out of their comfort zones. Confession, vulnerability, laughter, these were the bridges they needed to overcome the tension. All right, Sarah said, intrigue lighting her expression. Jake stepped forward, a mischievous glint in his eye. Okay, here goes. I once played poker with a celebrity. I've hiked the Appalachian Trail solo. Laughter erupted from around the room. Poker with a celebrity. Someone called out. Jake raised an eyebrow. Nope, the lie is that I'm afraid of heights. Murmurs of disbelief flitted through the group. Jake wore that grin again, one that radiated pure charm. The tension began to dissolve, replaced by an air of lightheartedness. Cathy felt banks of barriers crumble as she joined in, sharing her truths and lie. With each story told, secrets unveiled, and laughter shared, an invisible thread wove them together. Suddenly the room felt warmer, not just from the sizzle of the party atmosphere, but from the budding connections forged in these moments of shared vulnerability. Okay, my turn, Sarah said, stepping up. I once won a dance-off at a bar. I lived in Paris for a year. The laughter continued, filling the space with something electric and alive. Each person unveiled themselves layer by layer, and the shared energy wrapped around them, creating an unbreakable bond. As the games pressed on, Cathy found something unexpected. Jake wasn't just the guy who had walked in with bravado. He was a flawed human being, navigating through his uncertainties much like the rest of them. Their fears and secrets intertwined, a web of humanity laid bare before them. At some point, when the laughter grew quiet, Jake looked at Sarah and Cathy, a glimmer of sincerity lighting his eyes. You're right, I came here thinking I had to fight for my place. But maybe it's not about fighting at all. Cathy felt her heart swell. Exactly, it's about letting people in. Jake offered a genuine smile, the energy between them shifting into something respectful and genuine. They were no longer adversaries, but allies in a bizarre dance of connection. As the night stretched on, the atmosphere bubbled with carefree laughter and stories. Jake embraced his role, engaging with everyone eagerly, and Cathy caught herself watching him, noting how he shifted from outsider to friend in front of her eyes. Thank you for calling me out earlier, Jake admitted quietly to Cathy as the group burst into another round of cheerful banter. Cathy smiled back, feeling the warmth of the moment. Sometimes we all need a little push. Their conversation deepened as they exchanged stories, revealing snippets of their lives, their struggles, and their dreams. With every interaction, they peeled back another layer, each revelation strengthening the bond they had forged. As the evening reached its crescendo, Jake turned to the crowd again. His voice boomed with enthusiasm, and the crowd responded, laughter echoing off the walls. I didn't think I'd find community in a place I thought I had to claim, but tonight has shown me something different. Cheers erupted, and Cathy felt the atmosphere swell with joy. They had turned a confrontation into a celebration, a struggle into a dance, discovering collective strength together. Later, as laughter faded and the crowd dispersed, Cathy stood at the bar, captivated by the profound shift that had taken place. I would never have guessed tonight would turn out for the best, she said, half to herself, as Jake walked back her way, a friendly grin plastered on his face. Neither did I, he replied, but it feels good not having to fight for attention. Cathy felt warmth radiate in her chest, the understanding solidifying around them like a bond freshly forged in the fires of vulnerability. We all have our battles, she said softly. As the pair exchanged glances, the music fading into the background, Cathy felt the air shift yet again. They had transformed the night from what started as a potential war into something beautifully collaborative. They were no longer just individuals in a crowded room. They were allies, each sharing the journey together. Stepping outside into the cool night air, they paused, basking in the relief of what had been experienced together. Cathy smiled, appreciating the insight and sharing your truth. The stars above twinkled like distant dreams waiting to be reached. They stood beneath that shimmer, feeling a sense of belonging wash over them. This was the power of connection, the courage to embrace vulnerability as a source of strength. Still feeling the pulse of the party in their veins, they walked down the street, newfound friends in the muted glow of the city lights. Within each step echoed the reminder that nights like this, where barriers were torn down, could lead to the most profound transformations. And so, as they ventured further into their night, Cathy realized each of them had a piece of this journey and were finally free to share the floor together. In that shared space, they discovered that the power of authenticity could light even the darkest corners, illuminating paths yet to be walked. Together, stronger and forever, changed by the experience of owning not just the floor, but the very essence of their shared humanity. The door swung open with a creak that sliced through the laughter, halting conversations in mid-sentence. The music kept playing, a rhythmic thump, but the energy in the room shifted sharply. All eyes turned toward the entrance where a tall figure stood, silhouetted against the bright lights of the hallway. It was Jake, new to the neighborhood, exuding an aura of confidence that felt almost intoxicating. He stepped inside, casual and self-assured, the smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, suggesting that he had just stepped into his domain. Sarah's voice rang out, sharp and unmistakable. She was the unofficial queen of the gathering, commanding the crowd with her presence. Jake's gaze swept the room, taking in the mix of astonished faces. I own this floor, he replied, his tone dripping with bravado. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Gasps flitted through the crowd. Cathy, standing next to Sarah, felt her heart quicken. Who did he think he was? The atmosphere crackled with tension, everyone holding their breath, waiting for the next move in this unexpected showdown. Sarah shot back, her voice slicing through the unease like a knife. You've been here for 5 minutes. Jake shrugged, a casual motion that suggested he didn't care much for Sarah's authority. Why not? The murmurs in the room grew, tension coiling tighter like a spring ready to snap. Cathy felt caught in the middle, caught between wanting to side with Sarah and being oddly fascinated by Jake's audacity. There was a thrill in his confidence, mixing with a sense of danger. Respect is earned, not demanded, Sarah retorted, standing her ground, her brows furrowed. You can't just step in here with that attitude and expect everyone to bow down. This is our space. Jake stepped closer, narrowing his eyes like a predator locking onto its prey. And what if I've been overlooked my whole life? Cathy's heart sank. There was pain lurking behind that bravado, an ache for attention that resonated deep within her own experiences. But it was no excuse for barging in and claiming dominion over others. So what? She interjected, her voice steady but tense. You can't just assume control. Games can be fun, Jake challenged, an unexpected spark of interest igniting in his eyes. What if we make this a game then? The crowd hesitated, but curiosity buzzed in the air. There was something oddly magnetic about his confidence. Maybe we should go for it, Cathy found herself saying, not wanting to let the moment slip away. Fine, Jake suggested, looking around at the crowd. Sarah's skepticism still lingered, but there was a sense of surrender in her posture. Jake nodded, stepping into his role in this unfolding drama. He took a moment, a glimmer of excitement dancing in his expression. Okay, I'll go first. Here we go. I've played guitar with a famous rock band. I've gone skydiving. Laughter and surprised gasps echoed through the room. The challenge of piracy and exploration ignited an energy that began to dissipate the earlier tension. Seriously, someone laughed. Yeah, that's definitely the lie, Sarah chimed in, her tone a mix of playful and curious. Wrong, Jake replied playfully, a smirk on his lips. The lie is that I've played guitar with a famous rock band. The crowd erupted in laughter. Each round revealed a piece of their identities, building a tapestry of shared experiences woven together with humor and vulnerability. Cathy joined in, sharing her own truths and tales, feeling that familiar warmth that came with opening up. Piece by piece, the barriers began to crumble. Jake moved through the crowd effortlessly, cracking jokes and making connections. Cathy found herself captivated, realizing that perhaps he wasn't just the arrogant intruder they'd initially assumed. Perhaps inside, he was a guy yearning for acceptance just like everyone else. As people took turns revealing their truths and lies, the atmosphere shifted from animosity to camaraderie. Jake honestly shared tidbits of his life, exposing his fears and passions alongside other stories of adventure and pain. At one point during the game, he turned to Cathy, a spark of sincerity lighting up his eyes. "It's strange," he said. Cathy nodded, her own heart swelling at the sound of his vulnerability. "It's easy to hide behind a mask," she replied softly. "Everyone has their battles." But being real, letting people in. As the night wore on, the crowd settled into a rhythm. They connected, laughed, and shared pieces of themselves, creating a network of relationships grounded in sincerity rather than pretense. Jake shifted from the arrogant outsider to the engaging friend, and Cathy couldn't help but admire his effortless transition. They took turns with the game, Jake's laughter mingling with theirs, effervescent and genuine. The weight that had hung over them slowly dissipated, replaced by the warmth of companionship, vulnerability, and acceptance. At one point, while waiting for the next round to start, Jake looked thoughtful. He suggested, his voice tinged with excitement. Sarah asked, her skepticism still prodding at his boldness. "Let's find a way to celebrate each other's stories," Jake said, a contagiously wild idea brewing in his eyes. Cathy ventured, intrigued but wary of becoming too emotional. "Exactly. Everyone should share one thing they're proud of, something real, something that matters," he continued, his enthusiasm infectious. The crowd erupted in chatter, and Cathy could sense a wave of eagerness washing over them. They wanted to connect, to feel seen, to celebrate. One person started the impromptu toast, then another, stories pouring out amidst laughter and heartfelt words. They spoke of triumphs, goals, struggles, and everything in between. When it was her turn, Cathy felt a rush of warmth spread through her chest. "I'm proud of pushing past my comfort zone," she shared, locking eyes with Jake. Cheers erupted and the energy buzzed around them, a living entity all its own. It was empowering. As the momentum built, they continued to share their truths, weaving together a beautiful tapestry of inspiration and vulnerability. The room vibrated with laughter, light, and the understanding that they were all in this together. But then, just as the energy peaked, a single crash echoed through the celebration, a mistake made in haste. A drink spilled, and suddenly the laughter stilled. The sight of broken glass on the ground sent tension rippling through the room once again. Jake, standing closest, quickly reached forward to help clean it up, but his impulsiveness turned the joyous atmosphere sour. "What's wrong with you?" someone exclaimed, laced with frustration. The crowd hummed with unease, and in an instant, the warmth they had created felt fragile, like a house of cards poised to tumble. Jake froze, the laughter drained from his face. The joy they had built quickly fractured, the room spilling back into uncertainty. Cathy felt her heart sink. She had seen this before, the beautiful connection built on vulnerability and truth shattering with a single misplaced word, a careless mistake. Would they tumble back into defensiveness? Jake started, his voice barely a whisper, but the silence around them blasted into an echo, swirling with discomfort. "What a way to ruin the moment," someone muttered, and Cathy felt a wave of frustration surge. She shouted, surprising even herself, "This isn't how we end the night." Eyes flickered in her direction, surprise etched on every face. She wasn't the loudest in the room, but something deep inside her rose to the surface. "Let's lift this up, it's just a minor setback," she pressed, turning towards Jake, whose expression was a blend of disappointment and regret. "Everyone makes mistakes, and we're all here to learn from them," she added, scanning the crowd, searching for a nod of agreement. Gradually, the mood shifted. Someone chuckled nervously, breaking the tension. Another voice joined in, and slowly, laughter bubbled up again. The lightness returned. Jake caught Cathy's eye, gratitude shining within him. "You're right," he said, his tone brightening. "Let's not let this ruin our moment." With that, the crowd cheered, laughter ringing through the air once more, echoing off the walls, weaving with the remnants of uncertainty as it sputtered out like smoke. Cathy felt her heart race, realizing they had reached a turning point. They had not only defended their sense of community, but rebuilt it all over again, fortified now with a stronger bond. As stories continued to flow, Jake regaled them with tales of mishaps, mistakes, and the importance of owning not just the highs but the lows as well. But just as the mood began to soar again, ready to tip into glorious celebration, someone from the back of the room asked the question that pierced the air. The laughter stuttered, faces shifted into confusion, and Cathy felt a collective tension rise once more. It was the question posed out of jealousy or uncertainty, a reminder of Jake's earlier bold claim. The moment hung suspended in time, charged with potential for connection or conflict. Jake turned, the glimmer of confidence wavering in his expression. "I did," he said gravely, a vulnerability emerging beneath that bravado. Cathy's heart raced, the air thickening, heavy with the weight of his words. She could sense the questions swirling, feel the energy shift as they all held their breath, caught between acceptance and rejection. With every eye on him, Jake stood at the precipice, and the room waited in anticipation. Would they embrace this path of connection they had forged, or would they tear it all down again? Cathy felt the thickness of uncertainty settle in her stomach, unsure of what might come next, a break or a breakthrough. It was a moment that could change everything. Would they rise together or fall apart once more?